What stood out across the different life cycles or different companies you work with from the best founders able to do that the companies that failed weren't able to do?
The first thing that comes to mind is vision. I worked with a number of founders that had pretty audacious views of the company they build, the path they'd go down, and are, of course, all super hardworking. They have an incredible amount of grit. But I think when they're hitting bumps in the road, whatever form those take, it's the founders who are just sort of continuously learning, continuously asking questions, continuously iterating and experimenting are the ones that break through.
Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start back at the beginning. I want to start back in rural Paraguay. What drew you to start your career post-college in the Peace Corps? And how did teaching beekeeping shape the way that you approach building businesses today?
When I graduated college, most of my friends were looking at jobs on Wall Street. And I thought to myself, gosh, I've got the next 50 years or so to work. Why don't I look to do something a little bit different? 48 years on Wall Street, it sounds like plenty. And so I picked the thing that seemed most extreme at the time, which was the Peace Corps. There was a slogan that they had, which resonated. How far will you go? Obviously, there's a literal and a figurative meaning there. And the way the Peace Corps works is they sort of send you to a particular country and set you up with a particular job based on the experience that you had. I had studied economics in college, and so they told me that I would be helping beekeepers market and sell honey. That's a very, very loose connection, of course, but they sent me to Paraguay, and then it turns out I was in a town where nobody kept bees. So there was no honey to be marketed or sold. And that meant that I had to be a beekeeper, put on the suit, and actually teach people how to keep bees. And I don't know about you, but I was scared beep of bees. Never been stung by a bee, never associated with bees, grew up outside of a city.
Yep.
And so I had to overcome all of that fear personally. And then I had to help folks in my community overcome that fear. And by the time I left, there were a number of people who were keeping bees, which was great. I think the biggest thing that I learned, and maybe the biggest thing that's transferable, is just whatever you're doing, whether it's beekeeping, things I've done since. There are lots of hard, scary problems, but it always comes down to people, right? And understanding their motivations, their fears. How do you align with them? How are you persuasive in getting them to do things that maybe they don't want to do? And so the experience in Paraguay was, sitting with people under mango trees, drinking the local tea that they drink there, building trust. I do similar type things today, right? And recruiting founders to come work with us at Superset. So in some ways, it was useful. And then I would say one of the biggest things for me personally was it also gave me quite a bit of perspective. And so sometimes I come to work, I go over the Bay Bridge, and I think about how lucky I am to be in this place and do these sorts of things, which frankly are just unavailable to the people in the community in which I live.
Yep. Now that makes a lot of sense. And we'll get to what you're doing now in a minute, but I want to kind of take people on the journey of starting from nothing, hands-on experience, growing bees or keeping bees in a foreign country to becoming a successful venture capitalist. After Paraguay, you get into the startup landscape. Was working with startups always a goal, or did your experience starting a market and systems and processes from scratch, did that kind of pique your interest? What brought you from being a beekeeper in Paraguay to working at a large law firm supporting startups?
It was a bit more basic than that. I was really looking for a way to get back into society, right? I had took a hard left turn, and I felt like law school would be a good way for me to sort of integrate back into the US and find my way. There were probably 5 things that I was really interested in that would have taken me in different directions within the law, one of which was working with startups. And I think within maybe my first year of law school, I realized that would be the path that I learned the most and that I was the most hands-on, and would be sort of the furthest away from bureaucracy, whether that was of the government or of big companies. And so about a year in, I decided I'm going to go live in Silicon Valley after law school. I'm going to work with startups. And that was a somewhat untraditional path for lawyers, at least at the time, because typically you go to large firms that work with the largest companies, and I was avoiding all of that, hoping to work directly with entrepreneurs.
So you're working at it's a large firm, but you're just working with smaller or more nascent companies, right?
Yeah, the simple way I describe it is almost all of my companies, my clients, did not have lawyers. So I was always interacting with engineers, salespeople, product people. For most lawyers, if you're at a law firm, the person you're working with on the client side is a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like for me, that was just a far more enriching experience. I learned so much more. And I feel like the work that I did and the value I provided was so much more appreciated because they were also coming from a different perspective than the one I was bringing.
Right. You brought kind of a unique perspective and experience and expertise that they just weren't going to have internally, right? There's no one to really challenge you. There wasn't anyone to challenge you from a law perspective. They're really looking for your advice, and
Exactly.
you're an advisor.
I had a sort of a core area of expertise and experience that was just vastly different and helpful. And I think that that also allowed me sort of very early on in my legal career to be super hands-on because for better or worse, even on day one, I showed up knowing a lot more about law than my clients who were not lawyers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what you worked with, I'm sure hundreds of companies in various stages. What stood out across the different life cycles or different companies you work with from the best founders? What are those criteria at a high level that you see the best founders able to do that the companies that failed weren't able to do?
So the first thing that comes to mind is vision. Um, I worked with a number of founders that, had pretty audacious views of the company they build, the path they'd go down. Um, some of them have brands that we all use today, clothing brands, exercise equipment. So not just software, but also like tangible goods that are produced where you have inventory and those sorts of challenges. And at the beginning, those feel insurmountable. Um, but and I guess this relates to the Paraguay story. Like the way that they're able to convey their vision and get other people, investors, teammates, and so on to buy in is so impressive. And without that, um, it really is just impossible. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is being able to articulate a really clear product strategy. Because ultimately, when you're starting from nothing and your goal is to build a really big business that maybe is doing hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, ultimately you have to start layering on products and being able to talk about an insertion product and then shed light on the doors that's going to open for the company as you get to stage 2 and then stage 3 is super impressive. It's super set. We have a very high bar for what we consider to be a product leader, and it really does have to be somebody who can see that broader product strategy, who's not so consumed by the here and now, but can see how the here and now fits into the broader picture. And that's what I saw working with founders firsthand.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, before we get into Superset, I want to talk a little bit about the founders that are able to persevere.
Sure.
Maybe we'll thread this through a bit, but what is it about those founders that are able to push through this? I guess they call it the trough of sorrow, where it's post euphoria. Maybe they raise some money, but then they actually have to execute. They have to deliver on their targets. They're not finding product market fit as fast as they could, or there's issues in the product development. What is it about the founders, the leaders they're able to push through? How do they get through? What do the successful ones do to help them get through the hard times?
The stereotypical founder and the founders that we have here all have that vision, like I described, and are of course all super hardworking. They have an incredible amount of grit. Probably a bunch of circumstances from their life that form them to be that way. One characteristic though that I think is super helpful is still being open-minded, asking for help. Um, and so a lot of founders have a very particular experience. They have a very strong point of view on a problem. Um, but building a company is new, right? So um, building a financial model is far afield from what they know and what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe running a marketing strategy is very far from what they know and what they've done. I find that best founders are able to ask the right questions, so they get to the right level of depth. They sort of know what they need to know, but then also where not to go too far,
Mm-hmm.
and then they trust the people that they're working with to help execute. And so over time, you just see how they sort of broaden their knowledge. They become experts on the finances of the business and on the marketing of the business. And so I think when they're hitting bumps in the road, in whatever form those take, it's the founders who are just sort of continuously learning, continuously asking questions, continuously iterating and experimenting, are the ones that break through. I think where I've seen where it doesn't work is where you're just stuck on a path, right? And there isn't iteration, there aren't experiments.
Yeah.
Um, then you're not learning.
Yeah, I think you mentioned asking for help. That brings back a quote that from a book that I was reading with my children yesterday was "The Boy, the Fox, the Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse," and it talks about asking for help isn't giving up. It's actually the opposite of giving up. I think that's great. That's a great perspective, is making sure that you surround yourself with the right team that you're able to leverage when times get tough, or you're able to leverage expertise. So let's talk about Superset. Superset is it's a fund, but you also co-found businesses. Tell us what's different about Superset, how you operate, and what's unique about it versus the typical VC model.
We are a company builder. We found, fund, and build AI companies. Very explicitly, we're not a VC in the sense that we don't spray money across hundreds of opportunities. We don't source investments. So instead, we have funds that we manage over the course of Superset. It's about 200 million that we use to invest in the companies that we start where we're hands on. And we start those companies with outside entrepreneurs who we find and team up with. Sometimes we bring an idea to the table. Sometimes they bring an idea to the table. But the whole idea behind Superset is it's got to be more than capital, right? We've got to find opportunities where we think we're uniquely involved to help, or uniquely suited to move the needle. And we've been fortunate over the last several years to start on the order of 20 companies. Had our first exit in 2014, and sort of have started to solidify the model over time.
Awesome. And so how do you figure out, or how do you decide what companies you want to build, what industries you want to attack, what the unique um, what the unique focal points will be for the businesses that you're going to start?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because we have a lot of latitude, given that we have funds and we're sort of company builders by heart and disposition. Um, we try to run structured processes over, call it, 3 months,
Mm.
where we'll explore a particular opportunity and we document that in an artifact that we call the solution memo. So VCs have a investment memo, we have our solution memo. The solution memo is more product oriented. So think about what's the problem, who's the user, who's the buyer, what does the world look like today, what could the world look like tomorrow, and we start to research and validate and write it down, and then ultimately to hit the go button, because a lot of these ideas don't come to fruition, they don't become companies. We ask ourselves, you know, why this problem, why now, and why Superset? And we have to have enough conviction that there's a there, and that we can make a meaningful difference.
And so you're starting a bunch of companies that are likely not competitors. And so there's got to be a lot of unique features and strategies and processes across your portfolio. What are those things that you can systematize and build processes around that are consistent across every company, that that our listeners can take and apply to their businesses?
That's a great question. Obviously, the problems that the companies are solving are different, but I think in order for our model to be successful, there has to be some standardization in the way that we go about it.
Mm-hmm.
One that's top of mind, because we're coming up to the end of the year, is for all of our companies, we run financial models as sort of the basis for understanding the business.
Mm-hmm.
Often in the early stage, and remember, we're starting from formation, you're making up a lot, and that's okay. What Why that's really helpful is because it helps surface key levers, key bets, key decision points. And what I've said to our team is when we're creating a financial model, that's the vehicle for a discussion with the founders, with the engineers, with the salespeople. Okay, I heard you telling me that we're going to spend, $15,000 per month on demand marketing, and you've given me your conversion metrics. Now let me tell you what's coming out the other side, and maybe we don't get to the right place. And so the model is a way to sort of tie it all together and align everyone and get them on the same page.
Yep.
And to figure out what's important.
A model to start, also known as a budget, right? I'm sure you're
That's
running
right.
a year-end budgeting process. What are sales going to be next year? What kind of resources do you need to to support those sales? Do you need additional marketing dollars? Do you need additional headcount? I'm sure all of your companies have processes to close the books on a monthly basis to get you numbers that you can analyze and determine what's working, what's not. I'm sure you have legal that's consistent across. So is it back office foundation is fairly consistent, and month end close, financial reporting, all these things are kind of, I think we take them for granted at the institutional or at the bigger company level, but for smaller businesses, it's something that really can make a difference between success and failure.
Yes, and the reason for that is we're striving to become those big companies, right? And we don't want to put that stuff in place once we get there.
Yep.
Some of that stuff at Superset we sort of internalize and standardize. So we will own your accounting and finance function, and you'll get the highest quality work that maybe you wouldn't get as a very small company, and we'll grow with you as you grow. I think again, it gets a little bit back to the question that you asked about, what do I see in great founders? You really have to know the right level of depth to go to. So I totally agree. The accounting, finance, legal, all that stuff's really important to get right up front.
Mm.
Founders need to understand how deep do they personally need to go into those areas.
Right.
And so our approach is very important, and we want you to be focused on building and selling product.
Yep.
And get pulled into the some of the more ancillary parts of running the business when needed. But those should not be your focal point as we're getting off the ground.
Right. So it's make sure they're taken care of, understand the outputs of having a quality financial process, understand your numbers, your balance sheet, and your income statement, but use that data to go make decisions and go grow the business. Don't spend your time putting the numbers together.
Exactly. And also be a part of the conversation and figuring out what are those handful of metrics that really matter, and then run the business based on those decisions that we make together.
Hey everyone. I want to take a moment to talk about how we at ProSeer are simplifying accounting and finance for entrepreneurs. Through our outsourced accounting, fractional CFO services, proactive tax planning, and accounting software implementations, we cut out unnecessary complexity for business owners and entrepreneurs. Our approach provides real-time insights, practical tax strategies, and a clear roadmap to help our clients grow their businesses. If you'd like to learn more, feel free to book a free consultation with me by visiting proseer.co. That's PROSEER.co. Now, back to the show.
You talked about metrics, and I think it's super important for every company to have their own set of KPIs. What's the process that you've seen work to determine what things you measure? I think it's an old adage, show me what you measure and I'll show you the outcomes, right?
Yeah. So one thing So besides just doing sort of the annual budget or the annual financial plan, I actually, and this may sound a little extreme, I love doing a 3-year plan because then you're really testing assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
One pitfall that I see somewhat often is revenue growth expectations are so intense that so often you're thinking about how do I get revenue today, tomorrow, and not thinking about how do I get revenue next year.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to solve all of next year's problems today, but you often do need to start solving some of the marketing problems today because marketing is going to drive your pipeline, which is going to drive your sales.
Right.
And so having a longer term view on what we need to do to get to where we need to get is important. And I think the 3-year plan can solve that. We also try to put in place tools and systems very early on. So I think all of our companies from the beginning will have a CRM. Often it's HubSpot. They may graduate to Salesforce, but we're building those muscles early on to track data and to run the business based on that data.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so just kind of narrow it in, it's going to be unique. What companies are tracking is going to be unique to the business, right? How many metrics do you think are important for a company to track? Is it something as simple as, I know I need to track just top line revenue, revenue growth, gross margin? There's an infinite number of financial metrics that us accountants like to track and provide to to the entrepreneurs. But how do you know what numbers are the right numbers to track and how many you should isolate to?
Oh, that's a good one. So we tend to live and breathe in the B2B world. So maybe I'll ground my answer there. One way I think about it is sort of, call it not more than 5 to really focus and fixate on as you're getting going.
Yep.
Often, of course, ARR, but think about CAC, customer acquisition cost. Think about pipeline and how you're generating opportunities. I like to see data on close times, right? So, and maybe by segment. So how long does it take for you to actually close a deal? So those are probably where I get off the ground. I think once you're a little bit further along, start to focus more on gross margins because gross margins typically will get better over time as you have a broader customer base. And I also like to look at cohorts. So what's going on with the customers that you closed, 18 months ago? Are we seeing expansion in those customers? Are we seeing churn in those customers? And NDR, net dollar retention, is probably one of the most important metrics over time in determining if you've really built a good business.
Yeah, totally. I see that a lot. It's making sure your customers are happy, limiting churn, expanding their relationships as much as you can. But really, you really have to be in touch with your product and the customer to do so. How do you? It's much easier to do that early on. Being in front of the customers as an entrepreneur when you have 3 customers is a lot easier than when you have 3,000. How do you cascade? How do you recommend cascading yourself and replicating yourself and your vision and the way that you treat your customers down to the team as a company grows?
So I think you have to establish it as a mindset, as a sort of customer value. I think about Amazon. Customer obsession is their number one leadership principle.
Mm-hmm.
At Superset, we have an expression, blueberries and pancakes. If a customer wakes up and calls you and says, hey, I need blueberries and pancakes on Tuesday morning, we figure out how to say yes. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to embed that in the beginning of the company as just a core value operating principle. Of course, as you grow, a sign that you've figured a few things out is maybe you start saying no to customers. Mm-hmm. You have a customer that comes to you that's off strategy or who will pull down your gross margins and you say no. But in the beginning, I think you really do need to be customer-centric and you need to sort of embed that as a value. Over time, you then start to also compensate and reward people based on company success and the metrics that you think are important. Oftentimes it's as simple as just ARR, right? So you have bonuses or compensation tied to company performance.
Yep.
For CX teams, you're often tracking NDR and upsells, customer satisfaction. And so I think those compensation matrices start to get more and more complicated the bigger and bigger you get. But you align people sort of at the value level, and then hopefully it's reflected in their compensation.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because that's literally my next question here. So we talked about how to cascade vision down. How much information should be shared with the rest of the team on a regular basis? Obviously, we want our team members to be metrics driven and have smart goals. But what's the right amount of information to share with the team, and how often should we be sharing it?
That's a tough one, and I would say a nuanced one. So I'm going to maybe fork the question into two directions. The first way I would take this is, how much we enroll the team on the finances of the business and sort of the detailed, maybe proprietary confidential information. I tend to be a little bit restrained there. The reason for it is I found that people aren't always great at processing information that they're not accustomed to receiving, right? So if you're being ultra transparent with your team and letting them know that we have 6 months of runway, and you as the founder are, comfortable because you're fundraising and you're confident, your team may react totally differently than you expect. They may think, oh my God, we only have 6 months of runway. Now, as it relates to what's going on with your customers, I think that's essential. And I think in a world that we're in now with AI, almost even more important, right? You're building AI solutions that need to be tuned to get a customer a particular output that they're after. If product and engineering teams aren't close to the customer, that's hard. So I think you certainly need to be aligned very, very closely on the customer side. I think every company needs to figure out the right habits that work for them as far as, staff meetings, all hands. Our typical mode of operation, I'd say, is maybe a bi-weekly executive staff meeting and maybe a monthly all hands. And you use those as opportunities to give the right level of information on the business, to keep everyone on the same page. And then, of course, email and Slack for much more everyday communication and alignment.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Let's get into AI. You guys are AI first. You're founding AI companies. How should entrepreneurs think about how to use AI in their businesses? How to quantify ROI on implementing AI? What should their approach? What should the typical founder approach be to AI as they go to scale?
Yeah, so we think about this a lot at Superset because we're building AI companies trying to solve problems for the folks that you're talking about. So we're often thinking about this on the other side, which is how do we get them to adopt those things that we're building? Mm-hmm. And I think the advice is the same, which is you've got to pick the right problem. I think the instincts are to go to the core problems of the business, to go to the problems that are sort of most sexy, that have the highest obvious ROI. And I think that's probably a mistake. If you pick the wrong problem, it doesn't matter how good the AI is. It's just not going to be adopted by your team. Yeah. And so I would focus on a good problem. I think good problems are problems that either humans can't solve well or don't want to solve. So think software QA. Most companies don't have enough QA engineers to keep their software bug-free. It's just not possible. But AI can cover your entire app. So that's a good problem. Think compliance. Government requirements, reporting, documentation. Nobody wants to do it. Yep. And often it's a requirement imposed by a third party. So it's just added work for your team. It has to get done. It's a great problem for AI. So those sorts of problems have, fewer people in the org who are going to kill it. Fewer people need to change the way they work. Fewer legacy systems need to be updated. So you actually have a chance of implementing AI, and you're going to have quantifiable impacts. So that's where I would start.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think we're seeing a lot in the accounting and finance space. We have teams that are typically overworked, using legacy systems. Just by getting them up to speed on best in class software, they're able to multiply their output, and then leveraging AI for things that are redundant, that are non-value add, that are repeating processes, that are taking things from one place to another every week, is just something that you're not hiring smart people to do those things, but they're gumming up the system and it's taking a lot of time. So I think ROI can be quantified in time saved upfront, especially when it comes to back office functions, and that's what we're seeing. Is that similar to what you're seeing?
Just to go deeper on that, if you could probably find an AI software out there that could replace QuickBooks or NetSuite, and I would tell you that's a bad use of dollars, because I don't think you're going to pull it off. Like, I just don't think the organism is going to accept it.
Yeah.
But if there are reporting, for example, that flows off of your QuickBooks data or your NetSuite data, oh, that's interesting. Maybe we should start there. And again, time saved, happier employees. A good example is like responding to security questionnaires and RFPs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody wants to do that work. But if you can turn those around quickly, you shorten your average sales cycle, which is one of the metrics that we're tracking. So knowing where to start is really important, and I think it's a little counterintuitive, perhaps.
How do you help founders, and how do you help your businesses, and how are you forming businesses in a way that helps founders avoid, or how do you coach founders or your companies to avoid shiny object syndrome? And how do you keep the companies you're founding from being seen as just another shiny object?
It's a little bit hard because there's so much noise with AI that even if we're doing it right, how do you stand out? How do you differentiate? I think we need to recognize AI's limitations. So one is what we just talked about, right? There are just certain problems that are going to be better suited for AI based on the organization. Another is AI is great. I think I use maybe ChatGPT and Claude every day. But AI is not good for all things, right? There's certain problems where having a hallucination is a really, really bad outcome.
Yep.
So we try to focus on, what problems do we want to solve? How do we solve those problems in a way that works? So are we giving the customer a tool, or are we giving them the result that they're after? And in the world that we're living in right now, if we can give them a result, go back to software QA, we can give them a tool to write their own tests, or we can just use AI to give them the tests. We'll err right now to the latter. So we're not overwhelming them with new technology. We're just giving them the thing that they want. And that's a pattern that we look for and try to mold businesses to in the stage of AI that we're at right now, which is still the very, very early innings.
And so that's a great point. And you mentioned QA specifically because it's just there's a mismatch between supply and demand. There's just not enough QA talent out there. Do you see the biggest opportunity in companies approaching markets where there's just not enough expertise, or where there's too much expertise and too much capacity? Where do you see the biggest opportunity?
I think, let me start with QA and then sort of broaden out to your question. So I think with QA, it's a very well understood problem, but very hard to solve. And so to answer your question, I think there needs to be enough expertise that it's understood to be a problem. I think inventing new problems and convincing people that they need to use AI is a tough sell, and you'll end up spending a lot of time and a lot of dollars educating the market that they have a problem that they're unaware of.
Right.
If you can take a problem that's really well understood and help the company solve it or help your customer solve it, I think that's really impactful. And then again, it gets into questions of design, right? There's a concept of human in the loop. So how do you have your users engage with the software? And based on the level of sophistication of the users and their understanding of the problem, um, you start to answer those questions. So um, I guess there needs to be enough expertise that you're not convincing them that there's a new problem.
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely it's got to be a want versus a need. Because if it's need, it's probably going to be a crowded space, right?
Yeah, and you again, a lot of companies are out there claiming that they're going to replace QuickBooks and that they're going to replace Salesforce,
Yep.
and maybe some will. I mean, that's the legacy of Silicon Valley over the last, I guess, 50 years. In the world that we're operating in at Superset, where we make a handful of bets, those sorts of plays are a little bit less interesting to us.
Got it. So looking back on your career, what was one piece of advice that you would give your younger self about the world, about the way to work, about just growing up that you can share with the rest of the audience?
I think about this sometimes because I have young kids, and sometimes I think that maybe I can incept them. I'm sure that will backfire. It's cliche, but the expression "it's a marathon, not a sprint." Um, I think things evolve and become clear over time. Um, I was in the Peace Corps. I was a lawyer. I'm now helping run a startup studio. Um, you don't know how these things are going to play out, and you probably limit yourself if you think that you know it's things are not evolving and you're just set on a path.
Yeah.
AI presents an amazing opportunity to keep learning and growing. So don't be static. Keep learning. Uh, you might be doing something very different or in a very different way down the road. And I heard someone say this recently, and it really resonated, which is one byproduct of fear is we shorten our time horizon. And I sort of scanned back over my life and I was like, oh my God, that's so apt. And I think, keeping that long time horizon, because there are going to be bumps in the road, is so important. And just learning and growing and not fixating so much on the here and now. That's what I would have told myself, and what I'm going to hopefully incept into my kids.
I love that. Let's get into just a couple final rapid fire questions, and we'll go from there. So, what's one AI or data trend that you're most excited about right now?
For me, the answer I think comes to healthcare. Just I think the rate of adoption in AI. There was just an article is highest in health systems, and so seeing um, what doctors and healthcare professionals and researchers will do with AI. It's fascinating, and I think it's going to make for a much better patient experience on little things like scheduling appointments and follow-ups and notes and this and that. And then I think we're going to see drugs and diseases cured in ways that are going to be really, really meaningful.
Awesome. What is one book or resource you recommend to founders and friends most often?
One that we recommend quite a bit here at Superset is a book called The Qualified Sales Leader. Um, it's a great way for non-sales people, think the product founder types, to get a good deep dive into sales, but also a quick read tied to a bunch of anecdotes.
Awesome. And what's the most undervalued financial skill that you see early stage founders needing to have?
I think strategic hiring. I think sometimes for good reasons, founders will sometimes delay a hire because they're worried about the impact on burn. And it's a good impulse, and it's good that they're being careful, but it usually results in not having the person that you need when you need it. And so sometimes you just have to make a bet that we're going to need this person, and it feels a little bit early, but we're going to pull the trigger.
It's awesome. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you or Superset?
Check us out at superset.com. I'm always on email, jeremy@superset.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Jeremy, thanks so much for the time today.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for tuning in to 5 to 50. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with other business owners looking to grow. Do you have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover? Connect with us on LinkedIn or reach out to us at ProSeer, where we're empowering entrepreneurs with real-time, actionable insights and financial infrastructure through smarter accounting, tax, and financial strategies. Let's keep this conversation going. Together, we'll help our businesses thrive. Talk to you soon.